Paranormal M invites you to dive into the mysterious and unexplained. Hit subscribe and stay tuned for captivating episodes that will leave you wanting more. The adventure begins now. Horror in Oregon. I've been living in Idaho for just over 4 years now. I moved from the Dallas-Fort Worth area in 2015 with my parents. I'm 24 now. Moved out of my parents' house into my own apartment with my beautiful fiancée. Couldn't be happier. Since I was already out of high school and I keep to myself more than most, my group of friends is rather small. I'm fairly outgoing and have never had a lot of difficulty making friends. Still, the only place I ever really have a chance to talk to people is at work. And I work as a correctional officer. A prison guard, in simple terms. Being surrounded by inmates isn't exactly how I would prefer to spend my day, but it pays a good deal more than most other jobs at entry level. Worked there almost 3 years now, and anybody that I could call my friend also works there. It's not the best setting to make new friends in, but it works. There's 3 people that I hang out with most of the time. Bowers, Reed, and Taylor are the people closest to me. Sure, I hang out with plenty of others that work there, but more in a everyone was coming, so I came too kind of way. Bowers, Reed, and Taylor are the last names. Working where we do, that's how you know each other. So from here on out, that's how I'll identify them. I spend most of the time with Taylor. He and I usually go ride our bikes around town, grab a bite to eat, maybe drive around and talk. Nothing too glamorous. I see Reed most any day at work, but he has quite a busy life. With his wife, their new baby, his schedule is mostly dedicated to being a family man, which is fair. I still see him whenever he has the opportunity, though. Bowers, on the other hand, is who I have most in common with. I'm a big horror fan. I love scary movies, scary stories, scary places. Anything to chill your bones and make your skin crawl. Bowers is much the same. He's always talking about writing a screenplay for an amateur horror movie he wants to make. I always thought it was a good idea, so we'll sit at work and brainstorm together. Sometimes we try to come up with a story that we deem scary and unique. Not exactly easy in our primary setting. Prison is a scary place, but for a different reason. A lot of the time when we hang out with each other, we like to go adventuring to the more eerie places that Idaho has to offer. Given that there aren't too many places to go that'll make the hair on your neck rise, we have to get a little bit creative. There's some mountain roads, a couple of abandoned properties, just your run-of-the-mill haunted places. These places serve more of sort of an inspirational purpose than anything else. Gets us into the proper on-edge mood to come up with the scary elements to a story. When it comes to horror, Bowers also shares the majority of my views on what's properly scary. We both agree that jump scares are cheap. It doesn't take really much to make somebody jump, and it generally doesn't matter what object, noise, or figure jumps out. It'll still make you jump. For me to fully enjoy a horror movie, I like the feeling of being creeped out instead of loud noises. I prefer more a sense of, hey, did you guys hear that? Instead of a scary face jumping from off screen. I'd rather have something sitting off in the background waiting for my view to fall upon it. Bowers is exactly the same, so when it comes to individual preferences, they're almost identical. One day at work, Bowers comes up to me and mentions the place he saw a video on YouTube about. It was an abandoned factory, and I got to admit, factory sounded awesome. I'd been to abandoned orphanages before, sure, but never a factory. So I asked him, just how abandoned is it? He explained. Well, from what I understand, it was abandoned sometime in the 70s. It's a factory for making concrete. But when they built a new one, they just left the old one to rot. Sounded pretty promising. Where is it? I asked. A city called Lyme in Oregon, he said. Checked a map on my phone, and it showed that Lyme was just across the border of Idaho and Oregon. Not a far drive at all. The factory was sitting just off the side of the main freeway. Pictures I could find on Google just ensured that it would be a fantastic place to explore. My work week was coming to an end, so I texted Bowers just to set up a time for us both to go. My Friday was actually his Thursday, so I figured the best time to go would be on my Saturday after he got off of work. He worked up until 10 p.m. that night, so we would have the perfect mindset when exploring this abandoned pile of concrete up in the high desert. I showed up to his apartment around maybe 11:30 p.m. Once he had gotten home and changed clothes, he climbed into my Ford Ranger and we headed off into the night, stopping only for essential supplies like cigarettes and a couple of sodas. The drive was perfect. Traffic was almost non-existent going down the highway. We had the proper soundtrack of some Pink Floyd to keep us company. I was following the GPS on my phone to the factory. Even though we knew it was right off the side of the highway, we presumed it would be kind of too dark to spot it. So we hopped off the freeway and started down a partially lit road that turned to dirt after driving down it for just a short while. Since we were in no hurry, I left my truck in second gear and we just coasted along this gravelly, pothole-riddled road. Eventually, it led to concrete again. We had taken an exit that led down the town of Huntington, just to take a bit longer. Let it build up in our minds a little bit more. After another 15 minutes or so of driving, my headlights watched over the old concrete factory in Lyme, Oregon. The main part of the factory was on the right-hand side of the road. There were some old drum silos on the left. We pulled off the left, parked in the dirt. As soon as I turned my headlights off, we were both bathed in darkness, with only the stale green glow from the time displayed at my truck's radio. That was the only thing providing any source of illumination. I could instantly feel the sense of uneasiness fill me up. Wasn't exactly regretting the decision to come all the way out here, but it was the fact that we were all the way out here that made me nervous. I checked my phone. I had no reception. Barris had no signal as well. I had 2 small flashlights that we could carry and a full pack of cigarettes to calm my nerves. We also both were carrying our handguns, just kind of in a just-in-case measure. Got out of the truck, took a look around. As we stood there in the dirt, I looked up at the sky. I noticed how brilliantly dark the surrounding area was. I could quite clearly see the Milky Way. Millions and millions of stars twinkled down on us. But instead of peace, I was feeling terror. Keep in mind, I did ask for this. This feeling that I'm experiencing is exactly why I love to be scared. My adrenaline was going a little haywire, so I lit a cigarette to relax myself a bit. The dry, billowy smoke is just what I needed to calm down. Bowers followed suit and lit one for himself as well. The red glow from the cherry embers on the end of my Marlboro provided much more light than I'd taken note of in the past, sending out a radiating red and orange light, almost to where it created a scarlet orb on the dirt around my shelled toes. My shelled toes. As we stood there in silence, we listened for sounds. There were no other cars around except for the ones passing on the highway every couple of minutes. But none parked near this factory. There was also a slight breeze wafted through the property, creating the illusion that something was moving objects around in the factory. There was a big hole in the ground, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet. When the breeze would hit it just right, it would cause a whistle to emanate out into the warm, dry summer air. Walked over to the hole to look inside. Grabbed my flashlight, stood about a foot away from the edge. Clicked the power button, shined the light down inside. and at the bottom, maybe 9 or 10 feet, lay piles of rubble, rock, and wood. It was too far to jump down, so I aimed my focus elsewhere until such time that I could find another potential entrance. Looked back at Bowers, still standing in front of my truck, just kind of staring off at the factory. Walked up next to him and said, "Hey, this is pretty cool, man. Definitely a good choice." And he uttered a simple, "Uh-huh." I suggested that we go explore the rest of the factory, which he agreed. And to get to the main collection of buildings, we had to walk up a slight hill. Once at the top, we could both turn on our flashlights and aim them around at whatever caught our focus. I was focusing more on the graffiti and was basically plastered all over the walls. Some of it was actually quite impressive. Not just the simple tags or names and dates, but actual murals. And some murals got so complex they actually utilized an entire building. Mind you, some of the buildings are quite small, but they would base each one on what I think was supposed to be a Greek god. Each one had its own dedicated building as something of a tribute. Honestly, couldn't tell you the significance, but it sure caught my eye. Bowers was focused elsewhere. His face didn't seem to show interest, but instead indifference. He would walk slowly from one window of a building to the next, turn to face it, shine his light in, stare for a few seconds with a blank expression before moving on to the next one. Didn't quite make sense to me. He usually loves this kind of stuff. But as of right now, he seemed uninterested in anything. I walked over to join him at the 2 tallest smokestacks on the property. We poked our heads into some holes that looked like they were created after the place had been abandoned and looked up through the top of the stack. Looked even taller from the inside than they did from the outside. We explored pretty much every building that had an entry point that we could see. A lot of the roofs had collapsed, leaving some buildings inaccessible. Among more graffiti, the factory was now home to various wildlife from the area, some bats and birds being the most mentionable. Screaming lizards. Other than that, the factory was pretty much dead. Other than a few noises that could be written off as animals or wind, maybe a couple of eye tricks. Wasn't much else. Still enough to be frightening nonetheless. After exploring for about an hour, I'd gotten my fill of terror for the night. I had plenty of ideas for Bauer's screenplay, and still a sense of eeriness I was sure would last until morning. I looked at Bowers and said, "Well, I think I'm satisfied. Want to head back?" Still sticking with simple, inert answers, he replied, "Yeah." And I've worked with Bowers for about 2 years now. He got hired after I did. And after knowing him for that long, his responses were troubling. He usually had a lot more energy and enthusiasm than I did. Never seen him like this. Didn't expect him to be terrified to the point of paralysis, but he'll normally speculate on some scary stuff that might be happening there with me. We could sit there, scare each other by humoring the other on a noise that they heard, and not tonight. And if I'm being honest, Bowers was scaring a lot more than the factory was. On the walk back to the truck, I decided to mention some ideas I'd had for a screenplay to see if I could drag him out of whatever funk he was in. Maybe you could write about this group of teenagers that find this old abandoned factory, and they decide to go in to explore. Only while they're exploring, people just keep disappearing from the group, I suggest. "Yeah, that sounds cool," he replied. "Okay then, more than one word, I'm getting somewhere." "Or maybe instead of teenagers, you could have some kind of supernatural or poltergeist investigator," I said, "who's going on this trip to the factory because the inhabitants of the town think the factory's haunted." "Yeah, that may work. Kind of like the idea of the teenagers because I think I'd be a lot more scared of someone in my group disappearing than a ghost," he explained. "All right, this sounds more like him now, and kind of getting the old Bowers back." We made it down to my truck, still discussing other ideas about the screenplay. As we're getting to the truck, Bauer said, "Hey, wait, look, there's a tunnel over there that we didn't check out yet." I turned around, and under the line of silos, there was a tunnel leading straight underneath them. "Yeah, okay," I said. "Let's go check them out." Closed my truck door, and we made our way over to the silos. As we peered into the tunnel, it was pitch black. I could barely see moonlight on the other side, and still I needed my flashlight to be able to navigate through it. The tunnel was probably around 7 feet tall. I would stand up straight in it, but because of some pipes that were occasionally protruding from the walls or ceiling, I'd have to duck every now and then. While we walked down the tunnel, the sounds of our shoes and breathing was amplified. It felt like I was walking through a horror movie. The sound was so enhanced it almost sounded fake and fabricated. Bowers was walking in front of me, so I was using my light to focus on the ground in front of us. His was aimed down at the end of the tunnel. I could see the end of the tunnel, and it appeared to lead to a small concrete room with the ceiling partially collapsed. We were about a third of the way through the tunnel and still had maybe 150 feet to go. And out of nowhere, Bowers stops walking. I must run into him because my view was focused on the ground, and I asked him, "You good man?" He replied, "I'm not sure." "Okay, what the fuck does that mean?" "I don't know," he whispered. "Dude, you're freaking me out. What's the matter with you?" He said nothing, just standing there, completely silent. I was getting worried, and if I'm honest, terribly paranoid. Started shining the flashlight back behind us, half expecting to see some creepy humanoid figure quickly crawling to catch up with us. But luckily, the tunnel was empty. Bowers and I as its only inhabitants. Suddenly, I hear a scratchy, rustling noise. Quickly turn around and see Bowers in a dead sprint heading toward the end of the tunnel. I was confused, frightened, and frozen. I watched as my friend ran toward the uncertain end of this dark, damp tunnel, with only his flashlight as a beacon informing me of his distance. Part of me wanted to follow him, but I had no idea what to do at this point. In my head, I'm thinking, he's lost his fucking mind. I'm now stuck with him all alone in this tunnel. His light came to a halt in a little concrete room at the end of the tunnel. I could barely make out the outline of his body. He just stood there with his flashlight pointing at the ground. I shined my flashlight down the tunnel at him. I could see he was facing away from me, looking at the wall. I called out, "Bowers, what the—" And before I could finish, Bowers screamed as if he'd just been met with his worst fear. Can't imagine what he'd seen, but it must have terrified him to his very core. Dropped his flashlight and started running back down the tunnel toward me. Put my hand on my pistol ready to take aim at whatever comes behind him. As Bowers gets closer, I begin to see more of his face. He doesn't look terrified anymore, but happy, elated almost. I loosen my grip on my gun, thinking he's screwing with me. As he gets closer, his face goes from cheerful to angry. I could barely utter, "What's going on?" Bowers runs past me and knocks me on my ass. Hadn't felt a hit like that since high school football. As soon as I got my bearings, I felt across the rocky ground for my flashlight. The moment I grabbed a hold of it, I stood up and ran to follow Bowers back to the beginning of the tunnel. Rushed out of the tunnel, back into the open air. Pointed my flashlight and caught a glimpse of Bowers running up the hill back toward the main part of the factory. I stood in front of my truck, gazing up at this factory, just wondering what has possessed my friend to do this. My gut was screaming at me to get in my truck, lock the doors, and wait for Bowers to come back down the hill laughing. He was telling me, well, rather I was hoping, that he would tell me it was a joke and he just wanted to freak me out. Well, if that was the case, it was definitely working. I waited for a second to see if I could hear anything. His footsteps had ceased, and the only sound that remained was the light breeze in the air. I stood waiting for what felt like an hour, and out of the darkness I hear Bowers call out, "Hey bro, come check this out." "Fuck you, I want to go home," I said. I waited for a reply, but I didn't get one. All I wanted was to be back in my truck cruising down the highway headed back home. This was a little more of an adventure than I'd bargained for. "Bowers!" I shouted. "Hey bro, come check this out," was his reply again. For fuck's sake. I have no idea what's going on, but I am genuinely scared, and I don't know what else to expect, so just go find him. I pull my pistol out of its holster and hold it, if for nothing else than to make myself feel a little safer in this whole situation. start to make my way up the hill and gaze upon the factory. I shined my flashlight all around, searching for my friend, and I called out his name again. Bowers! Hey bro, come check this out. The feeling of dread began to pulse through me. Well, you have to tell me where you are first, I said. Silence again. I couldn't accurately gauge where he was talking to me from, but he sounded far still. I continued walking toward the factory, going pretty much the same route that we had earlier. I was starting to panic. I didn't know where to look, what to listen for, or what to do. Walked past the giant smokestacks and toward the main grouping of buildings. I checked through every door I passed, looking for any sign of movement. I announced, Listen, Bowers, I'm really freaked out right now, man. I have a gun cocked and ready. So if you're planning on jumping out to scare me, that would be a really bad idea. No reply. Bowers! I yelled. From over my left, I hear him. Hey bro, check this out. I turned to face him. Bowers was standing through a doorway toward the back of one of the rooms. The look on his face will be forever burned into my brain. He didn't look scared, or happy, or angry. He looked sad. Sad like he had just received the worst news in his life. Then someone came and gave him even worse news. No tears or anything, just a frown with the most miserable eyes I've ever seen. I said, What the hell happened back there, man? He didn't move, his expression didn't change. He just stood there, frozen, almost catatonic. I take a step forward. Look. I only got one syllable out before Bowers' face shifted from sadness to laughter. He was laughing in a very over-exaggerated manner, kind of mocking. The laugh wasn't the most disturbing element of this moment. It was how he contorted his face into a horrific smile. I don't just mean a really big smile, I mean like an unnaturally wide grin, literally ear to ear. He began to lift his gun. Bowers, no! I screamed. He pointed his gun at me and took aim. He bent his arm and aimed at his head. Hey bro, check this out. And he pulled the trigger. The sound of the gun firing echoed off the walls of the factory, bounced off the surrounding mountains, going back and forth like a metronome. Bowers' body stiffened and collapsed into the ground. Blood poured from his head, gushing out of his nose and mouth. There was so much blood I could hear the sound it made as it leaked down to the concrete floor. I screamed. I screamed as loud as I could. I screamed for somebody to come help. But then my screams turned to panicked cries, the kind of cries where you can't catch your breath. Never had a panic attack, but that's the only way I can describe it. I turned and scrambled for my truck. I ran over the edge of the hill and jumped out into the road. Without stopping, I regained my balance, scurried across the street to my truck, jumped in my truck, started the engine, and got out of there as fast as I could. Sped down the highway, trying to get out of the mountains. Hopefully I'd get in range of cell phone tower so I could call 911. Held my phone in my hand, waiting for even one bar of service to pop up. As soon as I saw the first bar with the little 4G next to it, I opened the keypad. I dialed 911, pushed call. Rang a couple of times, but then the call dropped. God damn it, come on! Before I could dial again, my phone started to ring. It was my fiancée. I rejected the call so I could first call the police. I'll just call her back in a little while, I thought. Started to dial 911, but my phone started to ring again, and it's my fiancée, and I answered the phone. Hello? Hey baby, you can be home soon, she asked. I replied, panicked. You're not gonna fucking believe this. I don't know what to do. Bowers and I got to the factory, but he started to act weird, and then he killed himself. I'm so scared I don't even know what I'm gonna do. I've got to call the police and get help. Do something. She said nothing. I assumed she was in shock as I was. Babe, can you hear me? Did you hear what I said? After several seconds of silence, I got a reply. Not in my fiancé's voice, but in a very familiar voice. Hey bro, come check this out. I think my late grandfather contacted us. So this happened a few years ago. I still remember it like it just happened. A little bit of the backstory right quick. My mom's father passed away from a car wreck that she was in when she was only 13. Never met the guy, obviously, but I've looked him up through stories and pictures and heard he was a great person. So anyway, that particular morning, my mother went to visit his grave by herself. That was while I was at my grandmother's house. My dad was going through some emotional situations at the time, and she told me that she prayed to him, asking him to show her a sign that he's still around. So fast forward to that night, Mom and I were riding to Shongaloo, L.A., Louisiana. If you've ever been to Louisiana, then you know it's just a bunch of small towns with a lot of forests and back roads in between, basically. So it's about 11:30-ish, I would say. The road we were on didn't really have any light poles or any type of source of light besides car headlights. We were just talking to each other, and all of a sudden, it's like time slowed down. Sound wasn't existent. We see this humongous, glowing, bright blue ball of light just appear out of thin air starting from the passenger side of the road. Like it was so bright that you would have seen it coming out of the woods, but it didn't. Just appeared on one side of the road and slowly floated across. Then disappeared as soon as it got to the other side. Just poof, gone in an instant. Looked over at my mother, and by this time, everything had gone back to normal. Sound was back. I still have the sheer, horrified look on her face burned into my brain. It was unexplainable. Never seen anything like this in my life. We both came to the conclusion that it was my grandfather's spirit saying hi to us. Say hi back for me. Fake mom. Wonder if this one's paranormal. One day when I was about 8 years old, my mother was given the worst news of her life. She was told by the doctor she had 3 types of cancer, and that they would just kill her. Well, she ended up passing away in August, and when I'm writing this, it's very close to her death date. But anyways, let's continue. After about 2 weeks into living without a mom, I kept getting these weird dreams of going to the park with her. Kept telling my younger self to stop picturing her, she's gone. I guess that was my way of handling grief. Well, when I turned 9 in April, I woke up, couldn't move. I saw my mom in the corner of my room, and what sounded like whispering. I kept trying to snap out of it, but I couldn't move. I couldn't get up to say hi and I miss you. Well, she turned around, and what I saw was not my mother. I shortly learned it was sleep paralysis, or however you spell it. Well, needless to say, I was scared shitless. Finally grew up and realized I was dreaming, kind of. Years and years went by until yesterday I found a picture of my mom and kept finding more pictures. Kept looking at them, seeing how happy my mom used to be. Till I felt a shiver go down my spine. Looked through the pictures again. Her face kept changing and getting more and more altered. Her eyes became more and more dark and her skin more and more pale white. Her hair was balding. Well, finally I put the pictures away. Went downstairs, saw the picture of her in the fridge, and screamed. My dad came running in and noticed that I was looking at my mom, and my dad just claims nothing was wrong with the picture. So why was I the only one seeing these things happen? Stuck. I relate. So I'm almost 21 years old. My mom died when I was 8, and I had creepy dreams about her. I'm really scared. 2 years ago, I moved out from living with my dad. Moved cities, moved house, and now live alone in a 1-story house. Well, one day I came home from college trying to relax and play some Rocket League on my PS4. Well, I kept hearing a woman scream my name outside. Finally got up to look and no one was there. Later that night, I was still awake gaming with some friends when I thought I'd heard someone jiggling the door handle. Grabbed my pocket knife, not knowing what could happen. Peered across the living room, staring at my door, and thought I could see a figure The figure sort of just staring at my door. Wasn't sure and wasn't going to find out. Quickly called my girlfriend, but she was asleep, and it was 3:33 a.m., so no answer. Didn't sleep that night. Fast forward 2 weeks, and it's present day. Sunday, November 17th. I heard 5 helicopters fly over my house, 2 cop cars drive by. Staying inside, don't open your door for anyone. So me being a dumbass opened my door, went over to my neighbor's house, and asked what was happening. Well, I knocked on their door, and it was cracked, so it slowly opened. I noticed their house was a mess and looked like they had just grabbed what they could and disappeared into thin air. And they had 3 dogs, 2 kids. Where'd they go? The figure keeps trying to get into my house, and I finally opened the door and nothing was there. Am I being haunted or targeted? Oh, you gotta follow up with that one. Sheesh. A scent I can't quite forget. To provide some background to this story, I used to work at a Victorian mansion in my hometown during my senior year of high school, up until I left for my first year of uni. I was a tour guide there, and because of this, I was kind of allowed to just explore the home during my free time between tours. This mansion, which was known for its eccentric owner and is apparently haunted according to local urban legend, is big. Big isn't really the right word to describe it, as the home is quite huge, really. Its layout's confusing, which lends itself to the overall creepy vibe that the house just gives off. This house is allegedly haunted by its owner, and I'm happy to confirm or deny which house it is if people would like that sort of a thing. It's a well-known tourist location where I'm from. There's a certain time of year running from June to mid-July where the house is generally more active. It's generally accepted by tour guides, as we were the ones spending most of the time in the house out of all the employees. There's 4 more sightings and paranormal experiences that would occur during this time of the year. Our running theory is that these weeks were the time in which the owner's daughter had been alive, before dying 6 weeks after her birth. This death was what really started the owner's spiral into what many would consider to be hysteria or craziness. This happened in late June 2018, if I remember correctly. It had been a slow day, especially slow for the summer months where waves of tourists would come toward the home. During slower times, tour guides are sent into the home to clean, generally dusting, washing windows, or sweeping, simple tasks that would help maintain the house. I, along with one of my coworkers, were cleaning in the owner's main bedroom. Thus, tour guides would refer to this room as the dead room, as this was, in fact, the room that the owner had died in. This wasn't something we would use around guests, as that would probably freak out the ones that were not fans of the paranormal activity. We had a lot of guests that were fascinated with the architecture or were there just because Yelp said it was a fun tour. At this time, my coworker was fairly new to the job. Seeing that I was one of the more senior tour guides with a year underneath my belt, I was pointing out things in the room to her. One thing in particular that I pointed out was a scent sachet that was placed in a period pitcher on the bedside table. It was supposed to have a floral scent of some kind, but it was not particularly strong. So guests mostly, they'd be able to notice any difference it could possibly make, basically. After doing so, I decided to actually do my job and clean. I was dusting the window frames. My coworker was inspecting the chest of drawers, and for reference, this is across the room from where I pointed out the scent sachet just a few minutes before. While she was seeing if the various drawers in this antique piece of furniture would open, she noted that the scent sachet would possibly be more effective in this side of the room. This was the side of the room where guests would enter in the tour route. There were 4 drawers on each side of the chest of drawers. She finally got to the bottom one. At this time, we were about 3 or 4 feet apart, our backs to each other. My coworker said in passing, "I'm sorry, ma'am," to the home's deceased owner, as there was a possibility that this piece was original to the house. We're unsure. We really don't know if the furniture was sold off shortly after the owner's death in a private auction. But as she stood up, there all of a sudden was a strong rose scent. As if somebody was shoving a bouquet right in front of your face coming from the right between where we were standing. I remember feeling this wave of panic immediately wash over me. As I turned to look at my coworker, I asked her if she smelled it too. She said yes, and that she was certain we weren't alone anymore. After a long second of us just looking at each other, two of us just bolted to the room. Or rather, from the room. We were incredibly spooked by this very in-your-face moment. I have no way to explain it since. And the smell of roses never fails to cause a shiver to run down my spine. I don't know if that would make it a good gift or a bad gift then. I like them. Was it a dream or reality? So I was about 13 years old and living in an old apartment with my mom and my siblings. We had lived there for about 2 or 3 years. Nothing weird had ever happened to us. Although the person who helped us cleaning the house told us that she had felt some kind of weird presence, but it was only once. One night like any other, I was sleeping, and to be honest, I don't know what time it was. Suddenly, I felt the urge to wake up because I was feeling like someone was pushing on my chest. I don't know if I woke up or not, and I don't know if I was sleeping or what, but I felt physical reactions to what was happening. I opened my eyes, I think, and I didn't see anything on top of me, but I was feeling a massive pressure over my chest, as if someone was pushing down on it with their hands. I looked to the wall on my right and saw a shadow that I have a hard time describing. Some sort of a big head with horns that was hovering over me. Of course, my first thought was that it was the devil or some demon. I was laying on my bed and I tried getting up, but I couldn't even move. I was facing upwards and my arms were straight alongside the rest of my body. I grew up in a Christian family, and I was taught to say, "I rebuke you in the name of the Lord," whenever I had to face some sort of weird situation dealing with paranormal stuff. So I tried saying that, but I couldn't talk. I was couldn't say anything. I could barely even move my lips, and I couldn't say more than "I." At the same time, I was forcing my body as if I was trying not to let the thing inside me. That went on for maybe 3 or 4 minutes until I felt really tired and stopped forcing my chest. In that exact moment, I felt like an inner heat inside my body, as if that thing got inside me. Plus, the shadow was gone. Then I really woke up. In case I wasn't up already, I don't even know. I felt a pain in my chest and shivers. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and the next morning I got out of the room and didn't get back in for the day. I even think I slept in my mother's room the next night. I'm 19 now, and we're not living there anymore. To this day, I have no idea what happened that night. Never had any kind of episodes of possession or something like that. I don't know what happened, but it was horrible. I wonder if it was the case of sleep paralysis or if there's actually something in my room trying to possess me. I don't know. It was the scariest thing I've experienced. What was the matter with this guy who's been harassing me in my sleep? Any psychologists or somebody who understands psychology? Raise his hand. Anyway, a couple of years ago, maybe 2, I frequently seen some visions after I wake up from my sleep in the middle of the night, and those visions lasted no more than a second. But I always felt like they were a little, if not for so much long, and they were vivid. I don't know how to tell this, but it felt like the time was bent, and at time that short feels a little bit longer. I knew those visions were short, but it felt a little bit longer. Continuing, this has been happening since I was a little boy. The earliest recall is having a huge-ass white, and I mean white, spider on my bed crawling upon me. There are some examples in the middle now and then, but I don't want to go into unnecessary details that much. There's just one guy who I've seen more than once. He's a guy with the look of a thief or a burglar. Same. Once when I was a child, I saw him in my dream, a white skin, well-shaven face, or his beard doesn't really grow. He wears all black with a cap and leather gloves and so on. Again, when I was a child, I had a dream in which I was laying on the couch in my living room. My mother and father were praying, indifferent of me, and chilling until this guy comes in and looks at me. Starts making his way toward me, hands stretched like a mummy. He closes in. His face inches away from mine, and I can see his iris clearly. I wake up and I see a glimpse of him. I wet myself crying. And last summer when I was sleeping, I suddenly woke up without a reason. No bad dreams. When I opened my eyes, it was this motherfucker again standing and watching me with a hand lamp. I was fully awake, and although the light burned and hurt my eyes, I could see his grinning face. It was him. Although I was frightened, I suddenly had an anger toward the guy. And these emotions changed, happened in 2 seconds. I was mad pissed at the guy because my eyes were hurting from all the light buried in my face. I yelled at the top of my lungs "I've had enough of you, motherfucker," while bolting out of bed to punch him. If it was a solid body, that would have been a perfect punch. But as soon as I did that, he pixelated, thousands, millions, billions of pixels like gold dust flying up into the air. It was almost like Thanos' snap. But that movie wasn't even around. I don't even know what that movie is. Never seen that guy after I punched him to oblivion. So what was that? The ghost we nicknamed Kurt Cobain. My family believes in ghosts. We have a lot of stories, especially from the current house they live in. We also prefer to deal with things in a flippant way, and I mean that we bless the house how many times, and some things always come back and starts drama. My mom believes that entities attach themselves to me, and I end up taking them home. But that's a story for another time. When my sister was in her younger teens, she really liked Kurt Cobain. Had a poster of him on her wall. My mom was kind of grossed out by it, saying his negative energy from him committed suicide would affect my sister. Yes, dramatic over a poster, but that's the type of person she is. At some point during her occasional lectures, in an effort to spook my sister, she said, "Kurt Cobain climbs out of that poster and makes you have bad dreams." And that started it. The ghost we would hear in that specific part of the house was now Kurt Cobain. And involving friends and relatives into the lore was a fun experience. Kurt Cobain walked around upstairs. This room was kind of a converted attic in a one-level house, so if Kurt Cobain was awake, anyone on the first floor level would hear. People tend to feel uncomfortable in that room, aside from my sister and myself, who shared the room with her, and I was around during college break. My boyfriend, who never really believed in ghosts, had his first experience while staying over there, and we now call it the Kurt Cobain Confrontation of 2015. Good movie name. My family had left the day before for vacation, and my boyfriend and I were going to follow them up early the next day. So we spent the night at the house because we were going to grab a few extra things in the morning. As we went to bed, the light we turned off flicked back on. Then we heard Kurt Cobain stomping around upstairs and opening drawers. In the morning, when we were just kind of grabbing what we needed to, we saw that my sister's bed, a large piece of furniture that has drawers attached, was completely moved to one side. This extends to others staying over, like my sister's friend staying over during a party hearing 3 loud knocks just recently. And in case you're wondering, yes, if you were in the same room while Kurt Cobain was walking around, you would definitely hear him, though it usually sounded like shuffling. To avoid from being scared shitless and being unable to sleep, I would plug my earbuds in and listen to some basic white noise or rain. Or something super normal, maybe. and tell him to just leave me alone. Something I ended up getting used to with various entities in that house. In regards to that room, once I was staying there while I was in town and my sister was out of town. It was about 11:30 p.m., so everybody was in their respective rooms. I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone when I hear boom. Sounded like a bowling ball was dropped in the closet. I'm absolutely shocked and I'm trying to investigate the sound. And my other sister just comes in to check on me. She said it sounded like I fell off my bed. Then my parents, who were staying at the renovated basement, doing a lot of construction in the house, came up to scream at us over the ridiculous amount of noise we're making. This asshole Kurt Cobain did something so stupid loud my parents in the basement woke up. Could never figure out what the fuck the noise was. Nothing was broken or fallen over. So that's the short story of how my family handles scary stuff. It's fun to say, oh, that's just Kurt Cobain, and somebody's staying over here something weird from upstairs. A ghost from a dream followed me in real life. So this is a story from when I was just a kid, I believe 8 or 9 years old at the time of my first encounter. I had a weird dream with a woman in a white dress with flowers on it. Kind of like an old nightgown, but more layers of cloth. She didn't look scary or evil or anything, just like a normal person pretty much. The thing is, when I woke up in my loft bed and looked out of the little window over my bedroom door, she was standing in the hall, looking right back at me. It freaked me out so much I just yelled out for my parents. I just hid underneath my bed. My parents didn't believe me and said it was just a bad dream. Well, as a kid, you believe your parents, have all the answers, and so you just listen to what they say. Go back to bed, forget about it. Problem is, this was not the last time I would see her. Every now and then I saw her, and sometimes in a dream, sometimes in real life. Sometimes clear, other times just a glimpse her in the corner of my eye. Sometimes at night, other times in the middle of the day. Eventually, I was in the last year of what can best be described as elementary school, here in the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, we only have 2 schools before you start study for a specific job and field. So I was 11 years old, and as a tradition, your class goes on a week-long trip the last year of school. That's a smart idea, Netherlands. During this trip, we're sharing ghost stories in the boys' room of an old farm that had been converted to a sort of hotel. There were already rumors that the place was haunted, supported by the fact that many of the photos taken inside had weird white rings on them from some unknown reason. But that's not really important here. The important part is some of the kids got really scared. One said the ground was spinning and tilting, and a few others started seeing and feeling stuff no one else could. And eventually, the panic woke up the teachers and girls in the other rooms, who all went to the hall to have a look at what was going on. So far, everything was fine for me. But when I looked into the hall where all the girls were standing, I saw here, clear as day, standing between the rest of the girls. No one even seemed to notice the grown woman, but I yelled out in fear to get away from me and leave me alone. Something I now regret, because I'm still not sure if it was even real or just the overactive imagination of a child's mind. Probably unrelated, but might possibly be relevant if something my mother told me years later. When I was a little kid, like 3 or 4, I used to talk to Princess. Not playing or pretending like it was an imaginary friend, but full-on conversation sitting there. I don't remember any of that, but I thought it was interesting and makes up parts of my theories on nature of this ghost woman thing. I haven't seen her since, but the memories are still some of the clearest I have as a child. Spent many hours trying to find out if it was even real. And if it was, what was she? Before I close this thing off, I might not have seen her over again. But sometimes I can still hear someone yell my name, usually a woman. Most of the times this happens when I'm alone. Not sure if it's related, since I'm also half deaf and my mind compensates for it in weird ways, like sometimes hearing stuff that's not there by interpreting other sounds as words. possible encounter with ghost demon. This story happened around 1 or 2 weeks ago, and is the first time in my life where I encountered or thought I encountered a ghost. I and my friends were having a sleepover at my house. There were about 7 of us. We wanted something exciting to do, so we're thinking of stuff that we could do, and we just remembered that there was this abandoned ammunitions factory. It wasn't too far away from us. Some people in our grade started to go, including me once. But most of my friends have not gone, so we decided to go. When we got there, I had this horrible gut feeling that something horrible was going to happen. Mind you, I had been there before, and when I was there, I didn't get this horrible gut feeling. I told my friends I was just going to stay by the car, but they begged me. So even though I had this horrible gut feeling, I went into the dark, lifeless trail to get to the destination with my friends. That's called foreshadowing. We finally arrived at the ammunitions factory, which if you were curious where it was, look up Twin Cities Army Ammunition Plant. And if it says it's abandoned, then you got the right location. Like before, it was creepy, but unlike last time, this anxiety only grew. The factory was crazy. I mean, upside-down crosses were a common sight. Same as 666 messages, and occasionally you would see satanic, hypergraphs in the building. Hieroglyphs? Hypergraphs. Also, my friend that he even saw candles, possibly used for rituals. Can't personally confirm that one. So we explored the main building and eventually went to the outside tunnels of the factory, which if you look at Google Maps, you'll see what I'm talking about. This is where the possible ghost and demon encounter happened. Mind you, before this happened, my friend, let's call him Connor, was, as a joke, calling out a possible ghost by saying over and over the phrase, "Show your presence." We were all in the tunnel when my friend, let's call him Thomas, was 100 feet behind us in the dark, trying to scare us, but instead of scaring us, we saw him sprinting at us telling us that he heard knocking. At first, we didn't believe him because the whole time he was trying to scare us in many different ways, but he kept begging us that he was not kidding. We all then decided to stay silent, see if we could hear anything, and sure enough, we heard a loud knock-knock. That's when we bolted out of the tunnel. We were all one group, and we were running toward the forest to escape when we heard Connor scream, which made us think that he was being chased, which made us run faster into the forest. In all reality, Connor just did that to be funny, which I don't know why you would do that in a situation that all of us felt could be life or death, which made all of my friends suspicious that he knocked. But I'll talk about that later. Apparently, Connor, Thomas, and my other friends, let's call him Brendan, all went back through the building to get to the exit. So we were in 2 groups, and I, knowing that splitting up is never a good idea, but blame it on Connor why we split up. At the end, after the group, I was traveled through thick thorn bushes, which we got cut up really bad in. Ran into the police, but just got a warning and eventually hoped an 8 or 10 foot barbed wire fence, which I'm assuming means hopped. And the other group traveled back through the building. Eventually saw another group of teenagers and decided to scare them. Hid in the bushes to avoid the cops, and we made it back to the car and went back home. Hypocrite much, but I get it. Turns out my gut feeling was right. As the last time I was there, nobody else is in the building. There were no cops. Mind you, this all happened at around 11 p.m., so it was very dark. When we got back to my house, we played some video games. Did some other stuff, even played some poker. When it was around 2 or 3 a.m., we started talking about the factory. Here's where the story gets terrifying. The whole time we were under the impression that somebody was messing with us back there. But then we talked about it. If someone was messing with us, they would have had to travel 100 feet in less than a minute, if that's how short of a time it was from the time Thomas ran to us to the time we heard the second knock. For context, none of us except Thomas heard the first knock, as it was 100 feet behind us. Two of my friends claimed they faintly heard it, but Thomas was the only one to clearly hear the first knock. There's two ways they could have traveled, either on the roof or through the trees right outside the tunnel, but with logic, those answers are easily disprovable. If he traveled on the roof, we would have heard him as the roof of the tunnel was sheet metal. And the first time I was there with my friend was trying to scare us by going up on the roof, and whenever he stepped, he made a lot of noise. The second option, of going on the outside of the tunnel, also doesn't seem to make sense because we would have heard the tree branches and sticks break. And also, the foliage was so thick. I think it might be physically impossible to move 100 feet in less than a minute, but again, you can go on Google Maps and see what I'm saying. Plus, if someone was messing with us, when we started running away, they probably would have screamed they would have screamed the P word at us or something. Also, when we finally got outside, we looked at the tunnel from the outside and we didn't see anybody on the roof. So the only thing I can reasonably think of is that it was one of us, but also, we were all in a big group when it happened, so I would have saw if somebody did it. Even if Connor was acting suspicious, I think we would have noticed or seen him do it. Also, it wounded as it came from the roof as well, sounded. Shakes hand at grammar. I've been jumping over most of them, go. Anyway, also, we were in my house. Connor put on God it was not him, as did everyone else pretty much did. Come on. A beautiful neighbor. A couple of years ago, I had come home from a typical day of work, and I'd run out quickly again to do whatever errand I had for the afternoon. I live alone, but occasionally have my kids with me. I have a corner lot in an older suburban development, and I'm surrounded by really good neighbors. The woman across the street from me on the small side of the street was in her mid-90s at the time. She was actually somewhat active for her age, frequently going out late at night and driving herself most of the time. Whenever I would see her in her driveway, I would make a point to say hello and ask if she needed anything. In addition to being somewhat active, she was also very witty. She always knew my name and noticed things like a new car whenever I would pick up one or something. And she would notice things like a new car whenever I would pick up something that I cleaned up in the yard. If we happened to see each other when we were in our cars, either pulling in or pulling out of our driveways, which faced each other, she would simply make a point to wave in a very generous way and smile. I got to know her sons a little bit, but they're both about 20 years older than me. We didn't have much in common, but we would chat whenever they would stop by to see her, and both of us happened to be outside. Probably around 4 or 5 months prior to this incident, I told one of them that she was out the other night. He had stopped by, but she wasn't home. He was surprised to learn that she had still been driving herself. I don't think anything of it because she never really seemed to have any problems and seemed to be very with it, so to speak. Soon after that, her car was gone, and the two men started checking on her more regularly, even though one of them had to drive a couple of hours to get here. So, getting back to the sunny afternoon, pulled out of my driveway to go about my business. I saw her sitting in her driveway in a white suit, bluish blouse, and sunglasses on. Pulled away slowly and waved at her, as I always had. She didn't wave back, rather she used one hand as a visor, and she was trying to make out what she was seeing, sort of. Despite it being me, who she had seen hundreds of times before, being only about 20 yards away. I sort of shrugged my shoulders, didn't think really anything of it, and went about my day. That was midweek, and to this day I don't know if it was on a Tuesday or on a Wednesday. Wouldn't have ever given it a second thought because it didn't really matter. That is, until that Saturday. Came home from whatever it was I was doing, and both the boys were there with their families and just trucks. Figured they were either there to celebrate something or maybe move her possibly closer to them or in a nursing home or somewhere else. Of course, I went over to say hello and asked what was going on. The older one told me that she had passed away unexpectedly of a heart attack. I was shocked and told him that I had just seen her in the driveway. I had waved to her. He said that it had happened around 5:30 a.m. on Wednesday. Rather than being overwhelmed by fear or anxiety, my mind immediately went back to seeing her that day. Still don't know if I had been one of these last people to see her alive. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 12, 13 hours before she had passed, or if I was the first one to see her after passing. Well, I'm not feeling so well, so I will see you guys later. Sweet dreams.